almost 50% of people have trouble focusing or concentrating. So if you're having trouble staying focused while you're trying to study, then you're definitely not alone. The good thing is there's some strategies that you can put into place to make studying easier for you. And I'm sure you've already tried the obvious ones like putting your phone on silent or do not disturb and putting it away from you, but that's not always enough to help us stay focused, let alone do some studying and absorb the information for our exams. So today I want to walk you through some strategies that you can put into place to actually make a difference for you. They're helpful, they're useful, and they make studying easier. The first strategy we actually want to put into place before we start studying. So it does include putting our phone away and setting up our entire environment so that we're ready to study. But that doesn't just include our physical desk space, but also our computer online space if we're using a computer for our study. In terms of the physical space, the best thing we can do is clear our desk of all distractions. So make sure that the only thing on your desk, your workspace, is your study material that you want to be studying in that moment. If you're using the computer, it's helpful to clear that desktop. So if you have a lot of things on your desktop, a lot of clutter, what you can do is just create a folder and select all of those things and drop it into the folder. So it's just out of your eyesight. The same goes for browser tabs. If you have a lot open, I know I do, close them all, minimize it, get it out of your eyesight so that you can't see it and be distracted by it. I also like to grab a coffee and a glass of water. It's my way of telling my brain that it's time to study, we're sitting down and that's what we're going to do and we don't need to leave. Everything is there ready to study. Step 2 is to set a timer. This is really helpful because otherwise when we sit down to study, it can be really hard to focus because it feels like the studying is going to go on and on forever, and that can feel a little bit daunting. So by setting a timer, I find 20 minutes to be a perfect amount of time. It allows our subconscious to know that there's an end in sight, and actually it's a pretty short period of time as opposed to say something like 40 minutes, which would be harder to focus for. Okay, here's the truth. University is hard work. And in my experience, I've found that setting a timer and taking regular breaks is not helpful when you're trying to get your assessments done. It's a different story for when you're trying to study for your exams, when you need those regular breaks for your brain to absorb the information. But for your assessments, when you're doing writing or research, you need to spend the time. I mean, think about it. If all you're doing is work for 20 minutes, that's not a whole lot of journal articles that you'll have looked at or a whole lot of writing that you've done. But one tip that you can use here is you can set a timer at the beginning if that's what you like doing. But then when it goes off, just hit dismiss. Don't reset it. Don't take your break, unless you need to go to the toilet or something, and just keep doing work. Because what I've found is that the most helpful thing about a timer is just that it allows you to get started. It allows you to sit down and not feel like you're going to be spending all day in front of a computer, even though you might end up doing that. Okay, back to me explaining how to use the Pomodoro technique for studying. I find it best to keep the timer visible in front of me. That way, if my mind starts to drift and daydream and not stay focused on the studying, by seeing that timer ticking down, I can go, hey, there's only 15 minutes to go. I can do this, and look back at my studying and keep going. Whereas if the timer is out of sight, it's a little bit harder because you don't know how much time you have left, and then you're tempted to go and look at it, and that stops you from studying for a longer period of time. And remember, don't use your phone for the timer. We want that well away from us, ideally in another room completely, so we're not distracted. After the timer goes off, I have a break for 5 to 10 minutes, and it's entirely up to you what will suit you better. I use that time to go toilet, walk around, go outside, get some fresh air, just take a complete break from studying. I then come back and I sit down and I set that timer again for another 20 minutes of study. I do this between 3 and 4 times, and usually by the end of that I then need a longer break, and it's a great time to have, lunch or something like that, or do some exercise to help feel like you're taking a complete break from studying and your brain can have a break and actually absorb the information that you've just tried to learn. Step 3 is having a clear study plan. So while we've set up our desk space and we've set the timer and we're ready to go, I find sometimes studying can feel a little bit daunting and overwhelming because we haven't decided what exactly we're going to be studying. For example, I wouldn't want to sit down to try and study an entire subject's worth of content before an exam. That would be too much. So before I sit down and study, I like to have a clear plan of what I'm trying to achieve. Am I trying to learn a specific topic within a subject? And that's what I want to tick off in that study session. Or maybe I'm doing a practical subject like maths, chemistry, or physics, in which case I want to achieve a certain number of questions that I'll have worked through and done that process. By having that clear plan, it also helps make me feel like I've achieved something during studying, because sometimes studying feels a little bit abstract, like we haven't achieved anything. But by having that study plan, deciding at the outset, this is what I want to study and this is what I want to achieve in this session, is really helpful. And the other thing with that is that by making that study plan before your exam, you can work out how many study sessions you'll need before the exam. For example, if I wanted to just concentrate on one topic each study session, then I would have to have a look at how many topics there were in that subject and how many study sessions I would need to make sure I had enough time for all of that before the exam came along. Especially if you have a lot of exams close together. Then the best strategy I've found for actually absorbing, understanding, and memorizing all the information is to use active techniques. So things like spider diagrams, flashcards, and testing myself over and over again by answering questions was far more helpful than just reading or rewriting notes. My favorite method was actually to learn it out loud. So I would be reading my notes, but I would try and memorize it and say it out loud. That's just what worked for me. And I also loved flashcards, especially for a lot of my science subjects, like when I was doing organic chemistry, being able to use a flashcard for what it would look like and what it was named was really helpful. So for different subjects, you might find a different active technique works better for you. I would just recommend that you try as many different active techniques as possible until you find one that really works for you, and then go with that. Because the faster you can find what active method works for you, the easier your studying will be across the board. The last strategy might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but it's all about rewarding yourself. So after you've sat down and done a study session, I find it best not just to have a longer break, but to actually reward yourself. So maybe you're in the middle of binging your favorite show, then I would watch an episode of that before you do another study cycle. Or maybe your favorite thing is to go running. That's what I love to do. So I would go out for a run. That's my break. And then I would come back and do another session. But whatever will make you feel happy inside, I find makes the study process easier, because then your day is not completely about studying. You get that chance to unwind and relax and stop focusing after focusing for so long.